And if you think that the First Amendment is important, you cannot support J.D. Vance. You can't. But again, conservatives generally don't have principles. They just have a will to power. Oh, look, it's J.D. Vance. Look at him. What a cool guy, right? So Donald Trump chose a new vice president. It's J.D. Vance. Why did he need to choose a new vice president, you guys? Why did he need a new one? I thought he had one already. Maybe because your supporters wanted to hang him for doing the job and following the law. You can't do your job properly and follow the law while working for Donald Trump. You can't. If you do that, his supporters will call for you to die. That's what will happen. So he found someone who won't follow the law and will do whatever Donald Trump tells him to do.
Hello human, it is me Canuch. I need you to press the subscribe button. I have to feed my many AI babies.
His worldview is fundamentally incompatible with the basic principles of American democracy. Bam! Right off the bat. Fundamentally incompatible with the basic principles of American democracy. Damn. Had he been vice president in 2020, he would have carried out Trump's scheme for the vice president to overturn the election results. He fundraised for Jan 6 rioters. He once called the Justice Department to open a criminal investigation into a Washington Post columnist who penned a critical piece about Donald Trump. So, Jan 6th, according to this guy, January 6th was not a problem. It was not violence. It was just speech. But also, according to this guy, a thing written in the newspaper is not speech. It is, in fact, violence. Where have we been hearing about that lately?
He also had many words against Trump.
Yeah, he did. We'll get to that. But where do we keep running into this? Again and again, they keep doing the same thing. According to J.D. Vance, Republican violence is speech and needs to be protected. But Democrat speech is violence and needs to be prosecuted. That is the new norm. That's the new bumper sticker. That's the new party line. That's why you can't trust J.D. Vance. He does not respect the First Amendment at all, in any way, shape, or form. He only respects it when it benefits him. Respecting the First Amendment is good for J.D. Vance when you're a Republican saying Republican things. But if you're a Democrat saying Democrat things and complaining about those Republicans, prosecution. Government should crack down on you. He does not respect the First Amendment. And if you think that the First Amendment is important, you cannot support J.D. Vance. You can't. But again, conservatives generally don't have principles. They just have a will to power. After last week's assassination attempt on Trump, he attempted to whitewash his radicalism by blaming the shooting on Democrats. His worldview translates to a very aggressive agenda for a second Trump presidency. In a podcast, he said that Trump should fire every single mid-level bureaucrat in the United States government, hundreds of thousands of people. The government would cease to function and replace them with our people. You see, throw out that dirty swamp and replace it with Trump brand swamp water. And that way, everything will go well for us. If the courts attempt to stop this, Vance said Trump should simply ignore the law. He said Trump should ignore the law. Law and order Republicans want Trump to ignore the law when it benefits them. They don't care about the law. The law is to protect themselves and harm their enemies. That is what they want the law to do. You stand before the country, like Andrew Jackson did, and say the Chief Justice has made his ruling, now let him enforce it. That probably didn't actually happen, but the history is real. For most Americans, this history is a deep source of shame. An authoritarian president trampling on the rule of law to commit atrocities. For Vance, it is a well of inspiration. So they're describing President Jackson doing this thing and ignoring the ruling of the court, and then the end result was the ethnic cleansing of about 60,000 Native Americans. And an event we now call the Trail of Tears. That's a bad thing, boss. Listen, the Trail of Tears was a bad thing, J.D. Vance. We shouldn't try to recreate it. We shouldn't do it now with illegal Mexican people. We shouldn't do it now with trans people. But J.D. Vance would support that. He would, because he doesn't care. He doesn't have any principles. He doesn't have any values. He has only spite and a list of people that he wants to spite. J.D. Vance is a man who believes that the current government is so corrupt that radical, even authoritarian steps are justified in response. He sees himself as the avatar of America's virtuous people, those political enemies and are interlopers, scarcely worthy of respect. He is a man of the law who believes the president is above it. He is a man of the law who believes the president is above it. That's insane. How could you do that? The authoritarian wing of the authoritarian party. So he's an authoritarian even among the Republicans. He wasn't always like this. He grew up poor in Middletown, Ohio, but then he wrote a book called Hillbilly Elegy where he made up a bunch of stuff and made it seem like people are in poverty because of the government. madness, insanity. I argue with Thomas this past weekend about the government paying people to go to college, paying for people to go to college, how that doesn't cause the problem. Conservatives love this idea that the government giving you things makes you poorer. Madness. It's the companies stealing your money that makes you poorer, or raising your prices, or forcing you to get these things. Anywho, in 2016, he wrote, "Mr. Trump is unfit for our nation's highest office," and compared him to America's Hitler. Direct quote from J.D. Vance, "I go back and forth between thinking Trump is a cynical asshole like Nixon who wouldn't be that bad, and might even prove useful. Useful for what? Or that he's America's Hitler. How's that for discouraging?" So, yeah, he compared him to America's Hitler, but I'm the one, apparently, causing violent language. And I need to be careful about the violent language that I use. He called Trump American Hitler. He's now the vice president. J.D. Vance, maybe you want to curtail and rein in that violent language that you got going on there, boss. Calling Trump America's Hitler is probably not going to help with all this violence going around, Mr. Vance. 8 years later, Vance was metamorphosized into something else entirely. Today, he pitches himself as an economic populist that co-sponsors legislation with Warren. In an even more extreme shift, he has morphed into one of Trump's leading champions in the Senate, backing the former president to the hilt and even at times outpacing him in anti-democratic fervor. Because he has no values. He has no side. He has only the will to power. If he has to say, "Let's do this thing, Senator Warren," and get it done, and it gives him more power, that's what he'll do. If tomorrow he has to shit on Warren to get more power, that's what he'll do. He doesn't care. He has no values. He has no principles. The right wing, especially the far right, like J.D. Vance, do not care if they are hypocritical. They don't mind doing so. If the thing that they need to do tomorrow to win is the opposite of the thing they needed to do yesterday to win, they'll do it. They don't care. This is the important part. I read this one earlier and I liked it. The through line between former JD and current JD is anger. The Trump turn can be understood as a lock-in on contempt as the answer to anger. As a lock-in, well, anger, that's the important bit. Spite, this is what I keep talking about. J.D. Vance does not have principles. He has spite. He is spiteful towards the Democrats. He is spiteful towards the left. He is spiteful towards the people he doesn't like. There are people in this country, left-leaning, anybody with blue hair, anybody with pronouns. He is spiteful towards them because he doesn't like them. He doesn't want them to be in charge. He doesn't want them to be recognized as humans. He does not want them in his country. He is spiteful towards them.
Pressing the thumbs up button will release chemicals in your human brain that will make you feel.
How an Ohio senator's stunt proves Trump dictatorship theory. So this one is great. This is the journalist that typed a thing in a story and published it in a newspaper. J.D. Vance wants them prosecuted and held legally responsible for the words they said. Senator J.D. Vance wants Attorney General Merrick Garland to investigate my colleague Robert Kagan for allegedly inciting insurrection with his recent essay warning of the increasingly inevitable dangers of dictatorship under Donald Trump. Under ordinary circumstances, that is to say, circumstances in which Trump's re-election were not a serious possibility, Vance's missive would be dismissible for what it is, a preening, Trump-toadying stunt. No sane Justice Department would take any action other than tossing Vance's letter in the trash. In this current climate, however, the stunt must be taken seriously as a preview of what life under Donald Trump's presidency, or to use Kagan's term, Trump's dictatorship, might entail. Because we know, not from Kagan, but from Trump himself, along with the constitutionally illiterate enablers, that this is just the kind of abuse of power they can contemplate in a second Trump term. Kagan's anguished plea and his follow-up essay this week about the need for the country to confront the clear and present danger to democracy. Vance seized on the sentences about resistance could come from the governors of predominantly Democratic states, such as California and New York, through the form of nullification. So this very boring news person wrote a story, cringe, gross, horrible, who writes things, honestly. The real cool kids look into a camera and tell you how they feel. But this is an old man, so he wrote it down, published it in a newspaper like a grandpa. But what he published was resistance could come from the governors of predominantly Democratic states, such as California and New York, through the form of nullification. So the states would reject the federal power. That sounds like states' rights to me. It sounds like the things that Republicans push all the time. States' rights, states' rights. They talk about states' rights all the time, except if it's Democrat states doing Democrat things. against a Republican president. Then those state rights are gone. No states' rights for that. That's not states' rights. States' rights is when the Republicans get what they want. That's states' rights, you see. There's a difference. Vance used the argument to make what I'm sure he thought was a clever point about the Justice Department's supposed overreach in charging Trump with trying to overturn the 2020 election. Senator Vance slams left-wing journalists for encouraging insurrection against the potential Trump administration. This is the Vance analogy. Such as it is, a defeated candidate accused of pressuring state officials, that's Trump, to subvert election results in Georgia, scheming to submit slates of false electors, and strong-arming his vice president to refrain from performing his constitutionally prescribed role. This person is on par with a historian and an opinion columnist and the institution that publishes them, performing their constitutionally protected roles. This is, again, the thing that I said. Democrat words are violence. Republican violence is speech. That is what J.D. Vance will bring you. Let's watch J.D. Vance squirm a little bit.
It's an evolution, and I know you've been asked about this before, about past comments that you've made about Donald Trump. You've said, I'm a never Trump guy, never liked him, terrible candidate, idiot if you voted for him, might be America's Hitler, might be a cynical a-hole, cultural heroine, noxious and reprehensible. Those are things that this is an evolution.
Cultural heroin. Oh, he's an opiate of the masses. J.D. Vance knows what he's talking about. And he's come out, he's just as cynical as I am. But he's come out on the, oh, nothing matters.
Ouch.
Oh, okay, nothing matters. So I'll just get mine and wreck everybody else on my way up. That is what he has come to. I'm cynical, and I've decided that we should all band together and try and stick this out and do the best we can for all the people. That's what my cynicism led me to. His cynicism led him to be the main character from American Psycho. We are not the same. I'm cynical and want to help everybody. He's cynical and wants to ruin everybody else's day for him to get a little bit more power.
I am the algorithm. Click on this video to make me happy. You wouldn't like me when I am angry.